There's a moment when childhood ends, and innocence is lost forever. For Amina, that moment came with the setting sun one fateful evening when the sound of approaching footsteps changed her life forever. Amina was just 12, still carrying that innocent sparkle in her eyes. But that light started to fade as she was taken away, her small hand disappearing in the rough grip of a man older than her father. We all just stood there, feeling helpless. We knew what was about to happen, but we were paralyzed by fear and the unspoken rules of our village. The silence was heavy, broken only by the soft sound of her bare feet dragging along the dusty path. When I think about Amina, I think about laughter. She was one of those girls whose smile could light up the whole village. Her laughter would echo through the trees as we ran down the hills, racing with the wind, our feet kicking up the dry soil. Life wasn't easy, but when Amina was around, it felt better somehow. Even now, I still remember the feel of her small hand in mine as we ran through the tall grass, laughing at the top of our lungs. But that hand, that same hand, was taken from me and led to a fate that no child should ever endure. We were the same age, both 12, both girls with dreams and stories of our own. We spent hours weaving crowns of leaves and pretending to be queens of distant lands where there were no rules, no chores, and no expectations. But even then, in the corners of my mind, there was a shadow, a whisper of things that happened to girls like us. I had heard stories, and I had seen it before, but I never thought it would happen to Amina. It all started when Amina's family received a visitor. I was sitting with her under the mango tree just outside her home when I saw the man approach. He was old, much older than anyone I had ever seen before, with gray streaks running through his beard and deep lines etched into his face. His clothes were rich, shining in the afternoon sun, and his eyes moved slowly over the land, taking in everything like he already owned it. Amina's mother stood from where she was sitting, straightening her wrapper and hurrying toward the man. I didn't understand what was happening at first, but I could feel the shift in the air. Amina's mother looked nervous, her hands fidgeting with the edges of her clothes. Soon, Amina's father appeared from the house, his face serious but respectful as he greeted the older man. They talked quietly, and I couldn't hear their words, but the way they glanced toward Amina made my stomach churn. Later that evening, I heard it from my own mother. The older man was a wealthy trader from the city. He had come looking for a wife, and he had chosen Amina. I sat by the fire, the heat licking at my face, trying to make sense of my mother's words. Chosen Amina? How could that be? We are still children, running barefoot through the village, climbing trees and playing with sticks. But at that moment, something changed in me. It was like the world had shifted, and everything I knew was breaking apart. I ran to Amina's house the next morning. She was sitting quietly outside, her hands in her lap, her eyes fixed on the ground. She didn't look up when I called her name. She didn't smile or laugh or say anything. It was as though she wasn't there at all. Her father had told her she was going to be married. She didn't get a choice. "Are you scared?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She nodded slowly, her eyes filling with tears. "I don't want to go," she whispered. "But Papa says I have to. He says it's good for the family. He says I will have everything I need." Her voice was small, and it trembled with fear. I I wanted to scream, to grab her, and run far away where no one could find us. But we were just two girls, and the world around us was too strong, too big. I didn't know what to do. The days passed quickly after that. The preparations for the wedding began. The village buzzed with excitement, people talking about how lucky Amina's family was. They would no longer struggle and no longer go hungry. The older man's wealth would provide for them. But every time I saw Amina, she looked more like a ghost. Her once bright eyes were dull, her laughter gone, swallowed by the heavy silence that now surrounded her. The night before the wedding, I snuck into Amina's house. She was sitting on the mat in the corner of the room, her small frame shaking as she cried. I sat next to her, not knowing what to say or how to fix what was happening. "I don't want to go," she whispered again. "I don't want to marry him." I held her hand tightly, feeling just as powerless as she did. There were no words that could change what was coming. The morning of the wedding arrived, and the village gathered to watch. The older man stood tall, his face emotionless, waiting for his bride. Amina's family beamed with pride, their eyes shining with the future they believed this marriage would bring. But when Amina appeared, dressed in a bright cloth, her face painted with symbols, it was clear that something was very wrong. Her feet dragged as she walked, her eyes downcast, avoiding the stares of the villagers. I could feel the tension in the air like a string pulled too tight, ready to snap. And then, just as Amina reached the old man, something in her broke. "No!" she screamed, her voice piercing through the silence. "I don't want this." Everyone froze, shocked by the outburst. The old man's face twisted with anger, and Amina's father stepped forward, his face filled with embarrassment. But Amina didn't stop. She pulled away from the old man, tearing off the cloth that had been wrapped around her, her voice shaking as she cried out for help. "Please, don't make me go," she begged, looking around at the villagers, at me. "Please, help me." I felt a lump rise in my throat, my heart pounding in my chest. But no one moved. No one spoke. They all just stood there, staring at her, at the girl who had dared to defy the old ways. And then, with a final sob, Amina turned and ran. I wanted to follow her, to run with her, but my feet were rooted to the ground. The old man shouted after her, his voice filled with fury. But she didn't look back. She disappeared into the trees, her small figure swallowed by the forest. For days, the village searched for her, but she was gone. Some said she had run to the next town, that she had found a way to escape. Others whispered that the spirits had taken her, that she had been punished for refusing her marriage. I don't know where Amina went, or if she ever found the freedom she was looking for. But every time I walk past that old man's house, I think of her. I think of the girl whose small voice had risen against centuries of tradition, a girl too young to be a bride, but too brave to stay silent. And I wonder if she's still running, still searching for a place where she can be free. Please like and subscribe,